Hi, I'm Abby, and today I want to talk about dimensions and consciousness and the soul and share some of my recent experiences of learning as a human being in a spiritual universe, or a spiritual being in a human universe. And I have a nice cup of coffee here so we can relax and talk about these things, right? Okay, where do I want to begin? I'm going to first just take a nice relaxing sip. So last week I had a pretty neat session, and I always have neat sessions. But this one I thought was a really good example of the interdimensional universe that we live in. One of the things that I'm discovering too that I think will help to clarify what a soul identity is soul to a human being. We often think of a soul as one thing, okay? So we're one soul, we live a life, we die, we go to heaven as one soul, okay? But this soul is multidimensional. So if we call it a soul, it can't be just one thing, it has to be a multidimensional thing. So how do we identify a soul as a multidimensional thing? So I'm finding that to use the term consciousness works better. And so you have consciousness, I have consciousness, everybody has consciousness. Does consciousness come from the brain? Does the brain manifest consciousness? Does the heart manifest consciousness? Does the biology manifest the consciousness? Does the DNA manifest the consciousness? So is consciousness a biological thing, or is there something more to it? I define consciousness as soul, as energy. And I feel very confident that we are far more consciousness than we are body. We're far more consciousness than we are anything in this world. This world is an illusionary experience. How do we explain that? It feels quite tangible. I swear to God, this is a real cup of coffee that I'm drinking right now. How could this coffee be an illusion? How can this experience right here be an illusion? It's an experience. So is the experience consciousness? Is this a consciousness experience, an energetic thing? Or is it a physical thing? Or perhaps physical is a consciousness of its own type, and we're just exploring that consciousness right now. And it could be anything it wants it to be. And perhaps what it wants it to be is what the collective is exploring as a group, even though we're kind of exploring in different ways in different cultures. So I want to throw that out there first, because I want to talk about dimensions, and I want to make sure that before I go into this conversation, we can explore the consciousness or the soul as beyond just one thing, but many things living in many different realms simultaneously. So, okay. In this session, it was really random and neat because I got to see the consciousness working from all different levels simultaneously. And the first part of the session, I'm going in, and I never know what I'm going to walk myself into. But this person's soul, this client's soul, was exploring resistance, okay? It was exploring identity and resisting that identity, or confusion about that identity. We start by walking into a wall, all right? And the wall is covered with all these sort of runes or hieroglyphs, but it looked like runes. And the client is using her fingers like she's reading Braille, trying to figure out what this means. What is the spirit realm trying to tell me? What is my purpose here? I just needed somebody to tell me my purpose. And it feels like I'm trying to read Braille and nobody taught me Braille. And how am I supposed to translate this? And this part of the client's consciousness was giving up, okay? Was just putting the foot down. I'm not going to do this without somebody coming in here and giving me some stinking answers. That's what their energy consciousness was like in the session, okay? So I'm going in there, and I'm like the boot camp drill sergeant, like, get up. I'm here to help you. Heaven sent me. And we're going to figure out this Braille thing. All the while, I just pick the client up and we walk through this doorway, this sort of Braille hieroglyphic thing that was being read. And we're walking through it as though it is a doorway to another dimension. Now, in this dimension, the client is going through a challenging self-realization process. in this dimension. And I would define this dimension. Let's just throw it out there. I don't like to put numbers on dimensions. The human race wants to say, there's a third dimension and a fourth and a fifth, and let's make it logical and comprehensive and understandable. But the less understandable it is, the more realistic it is to an infinite universe. Because we're human beings and we understand this much of an infinite universe. So, all right. I'm going to relax here and try and figure out the best way to tell you the next thing. All right, so the client had lots of connected parts. And these connected what would be energetic cords, you could call them, in this dimension, which I would define as the fourth dimension, 4/5th dimension. 4/5th dimension is is not an all-knowing dimensional plane, all right? God consciousness is all-knowing, but what dimensional plane is God consciousness? Is the oneness. Every dimension beneath that consciousness is going to be self-realizing. It's separated from God consciousness. That's what we incarnate in different dimensions, and we do it all at the same time. So in this 4th, 5th dimension, we have the client here on let's just call Earth the 3rd dimension, okay? And now the client is simultaneously having a consciousness experience on the 4th, 5th dimension that looks like this. There's infinite numbers of consciousness experiences. All right. Now, as we're going through this client is connected with a lot of different planets and wanting to bring information to planet Earth from these planets, but nobody is helping this client to translate the meaning of her soul, all right, of her infinite consciousness in a way that can be expressed to the human race so people can understand, all right, here on our planet. And then this has been very frustrating. Well, all these connective rods are keeping her attached to planets when really attachments... We don't want attachments. We don't want attachments to other planets. That's actually not ever going to help you. Being attached to anything does not help you. One way to think about attachments is, and how attachments don't help you. Let's say you're static electricity and you're attached to your car and the car is like staticking to you. Now you're attached to your house and everything in your house. You're attached to your friends. You're attached to your kids. You're attached to your parents. You're attached to all of this stuff. And you could be attached in negative ways and positive ways, but you don't want to let go. You don't want to let go of the negative stuff or the positive stuff. And so it just starts to stick to you. So you start to have thousands of things sticking to you. How are you supposed to go through life with all these attachments? Even attachments to other planets and other lifetimes do not help you. They don't create more awareness of those other lifetimes. They keep you stuck. And you really need to let go of the attachments so you can find the wisdom within yourself. You don't have to be attached to what's out there because everything is inside yourself. So I was trying to get this deeper consciousness of the client in the 4th, 5th dimension to self-realize, to let go of the attachments to the other planets because she already has all the wisdom inside of herself. She doesn't need to be attached as though it's like a, like piping that's sending information. But she is insisting she needs these attachments. And I couldn't on my life. And I mean, I was boot camp drill sergeant. You need to get rid of these attachments. These are the reasons why. No, not going to do it. And I was like, fine, I'm leaving. I walked out the doorway of Braille, right? I walked out, left. This part of the client's consciousness, all right? This is going to get interesting, like putting a puzzle piece together. Not just one, but many puzzle pieces, okay? We got to see the bigger picture. So I walk out. And I walked to what was a higher dimension, all right, just slightly higher than this one, to go talk to a part of her higher self. And up here, I could actually see what was going on down here with this part of the consciousness, all right? Because we're multidimensional. It's so crazy. Let's just say this part of her higher self is at the 6th dimension. We have higher selves in the 4th and 5th dimension. This 4th, 5th dimension higher self is still attached to all this junk and is sending this information back to the 3rd dimensional human, okay? And so all this junk is still like clogging up the radar. And then we have this like higher self in the 6th dimension. But we have higher selves in the 7th and 8th and 9th and 10th and all dimensions. Because we're interdimensionally connected to everything. And our consciousness is just not one soul, it's many parts of ourself all over the place. So then we have this, let's just say, 6th dimensional, like higher self, all right? And from up here, we could actually look down and see this platform where the client is like got all these rods coming out and attached to all these planets and not letting go, okay? And I'm talking to the higher self and saying, you know, what I'm frustrated with, what we need to do to get you back into balance for Earth experience, right? So we can reconcile all this stuff. So everything was cool. 6th dimensional higher self, we worked through it. And I said, okay, I'm going to go back down there and then I'm going to see if I can get you to disconnect. So I went back down. Are you following me here? This is so interesting. Okay, so I went back down. And this very specific rod coming through the heart is taking us to a planet, all right? Is the planet is way over there. But when I come back down, I start to notice there's more pieces, more rods, more energetic cords connected to more planets and stars out there. And I was like, holy smokes, now I'm seeing more of these energetic cords that we need to let go of. And she's still like, I can't let go of it. I just can't let go of it. And she's telling me, we need to go to this planet here. I need to go to this planet. It's the only way. So I'm like, she's like a piece of steak on a shish kebab, and I have to help push her through her own energetic cord to this planet that she's really insistent on. She has to get to this planet. Consciousness here. The human has no freaking clue this stuff is going on, but this stuff is going on, I'm telling you. So she goes into this planet, and this planet is a memory, all right? A memory that comes through as a story of what felt like being a planet herself. And as a planet herself, somehow things got out of orbit. And the planet out of orbit is just sort of out of orbit. It just loses its balance. It loses its gravity. It loses its place. And when it's out of balance, it loses its gravity. It just starts to, it flings out. But in the story, it just sort of falls down, okay? And it's dropping and dropping and dropping, and there's nobody to help. And it just feels like feeling lost. It feels, how many times have we as a human, we as a human race, or just as an individual, felt like we've gone out of orbit, and there's been nobody there to help us, and we're just falling and falling and falling and falling into the great abyss of the universe, and there's nobody here to help us. So the story was like this for her soul. And this planet that fell out of orbit is made out of red dust. It kind of looks like Mars, but it's not Mars. Anyway, she merges with the planet and goes all the way into the center of the planet. The center of the planet. I have so much I want to tell you. So this part of her consciousness falls asleep in the center of the planet, and the planet acts sort of like a rehabilitation chamber. The inside acts like a rehabilitation chamber, sort of like a shell now, like she's a baby chicken waiting to hatch. So this part of her consciousness is doing that. And so I go back to that platform and I say, wow, what do I do now? And I start to see that there's even more, another version of herself from the past before she went into that planet. This is going to get so complicated. Is still there. So past, present, and future is all one. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the timeline is. You can access the same version of yourself over and over and over and over and over again at that exact same time in that exact same place. And you can have new versions of conversations, new versions of self-realization going on. Anyway, I had to go back in time, so to speak, to rediscover that part of herself. And it was all hooked up to all, like, even more planets, like 200 different, like, energetic cords, all these planets. But she looked more like kind of like a synapse. Isn't that what they're called? Like a brain thing? And then it's got all these little pieces, and there's like electrical beacons, like pew, 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 going to this middle thing. And then it sort of processes it, and then it sends information out. Well, that's what her soul was acting like. It was acting like a little ball of information was going in, and she's processing it and sending information out. All the while, I am taken yet to a higher dimensional plane, all right? This would be, let's just say, 7th, 8th dimension. I don't know. I don't know how you want to define it, but it was higher up. And this dimension was called the center of, let's see here, the Galactic Center. That's what it was called. It was called the Galactic Center. Remember, this was last week, so I got to try to remember this stuff. And I've been wanting to tell you guys all about it, and it's just taken time. I haven't been able to tell you about it until now. So I go to the Galactic Center. I've never called any of this stuff, I don't like labels because we get attached to labels, and now we have another static electricity attachment. Like, we really want things to be a certain way. We'll stop wanting it to be that way. I don't like to create labels. Anyway, Galactic Center was what I was asked to define it as. And in the Galactic Center, it was so wild and so crazy. There was basically, I was taken to a library, all right? You could call it Akashic Records. You could call it like the Galactic University. It's like a universe of its own kind, and you can find all this information there. And it could look like a library. It could look like orbs. It could look like water. It could look like anything. It doesn't matter. It's just however you want to perceive it as. So I walk into this library at this Galactic Center, and another version of herself is there. How could there be all these versions of herself all over the place in all these different dimensions? It's just so crazy, right? So there's another version of herself there. And this version of herself has a book. And she's sort of like, is she putting the book on the shelf, or is she taking the book out? She's putting the book or taking the book out. Anyway, that's part of the message. And as I was looking at her and trying to figure this book thing out, she transforms into another version of herself from another time and place. This version of herself was so incomprehensible. It was alien, and it was so strange looking. And what it looked like was like a rectangle of Jell-O, but it was more like water. And I don't know how it was suspended, because it wasn't Jell-O-like. It wasn't dense. It was more like a liquid. And the water was streaming, and it kind of had a mood ring effect. So it's like sort of changing colors. And then it was made up of like thousands and thousands and thousands of bubbles inside of itself. And this being was like educated, like intelligent, like could give a lecture at the university. I couldn't even fathom where's the heart, where's the mind, how does this work, like what is this thing, But it was so cool. This was another reflection of herself. And then through this reflection, as I was trying to like figure this out, and then I was looking back at this book and trying to like read it, then it's full of these runes, and I was like, oh great, more of this Braille language. And now I'm looking at the pictures, and I, trying to absorb and digest what it all means. I look back up, and she changes to yet another reflection of her many forms, all right? We can be many things, because truly we're everything. But this was another version of herself, incomprehensible version of herself. What I could only describe as was like 6 inches wide, and it looked like a smushed elephant, like an elephant's face with the white tusks and then a long trunk, and it was all smushed. And it can't speak. This long trunk thing was just, I don't know if it was like a super long chin or something, but it doesn't communicate. It does not speak. But it uses its eyes like we use our hands, and it uses its eyes to communicate. And then it sends psychic messages too. This is also like super intelligent being, like in the universe, another creative reflection of the client. I don't always get it like this. Like when I do sessions, I never know what's going to happen. It's always going to be exactly what you need at this now moment in your soul journey. So it was super cool because it was so interdimensional, and I get to see all these different alien reflections. Anyway, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is another crazy reflection of this client. And the message from this version of her higher self was that, in order to understand the Braille, you have to first realize that a lot of all that you are and what you bring to earth is not going to be comprehensible to your human form. So for you to translate yourself is not going to be possible. So just don't even try to comprehend who and what you are. Just take the baby steps. And this is one of the baby steps in understanding who you are. And it's multidimensional. And anyway, so we got all this information at the Galactic Center. And this part of her higher self had encouraged me to go visit the Galactic Center. So of course I was like, well, sure, I guess I need to check this out. And so after that, I decided, it's time to go back down again. So it's like, wow, see you later, 8th dimensional version of yourself. And then see you later, 6th dimensional version of yourself. Like we're going on down the dimensions, and I'm just like waving to these parts of yourself. On down to what is this, like 4th, 5th dimensional. I don't know how you want to define it, but it was lower vibrationally. In the experience of separation from the oneness, all right? And it was all hooked up to all this different stuff. And I go to talk to this reflection so I could resolve this severe imbalance here that is being projected all the way down to the earth dimension, all right? And so I talk to this reflection, and I say, what is going on here? You have all these like cords hooked up. And what about that part of yourself that went into the planet? What are we going to do about this? Instantaneously, she started to wake up, this part of her, and then said, oh, wow, my twin. I forgot about my twin. Thank you for reminding me. And then became the information itself, or herself, and beamed herself through one of the cords all the way to the planet. And then went into the planet, merged with herself in the planet, and then herself seriously just woke up into a super bright light. The planet cracked open like a shell, and all the cords were gone. Everything was completely gone, and the whole shebang was rebalanced. Everything was rebalanced. Does any of this make sense to you? We're looking at different dimensions and how they impact us here on Earth. But understanding that we're not just one soul, we're interdimensionally connected. We're literally connected to everything. And this is a real session that I provided. I'm having to recall all the amazing details of it and then bring it back to tell you this as an example of what interdimensional means and what it looks like and how it affects us here. When we start to feel, I guess, out of harmony, everything's always in the balance, right? Even when we're out of tune or out of harmony. It's just, do you choose to be, you get to choose to be however you want to be. Sometimes we get really focused on being angry, and that is your balance. Or you could change that and want to work on that, and then you fine tune it, and now you are choosing to work on feeling peaceful. So you get to fine tune yourself however you want. That when I do journeys and energy work, I get to feel the frequency balance, and then we bring it into balance. And I got the opportunity to see all these different dimensions and how they were working together to challenge the client and how to bring it all into balance into one like super connected experience. So that was a mouthful. That was a really big mouthful. And I wanted to tell you the second part of this message. And the second part of this message is my experience going to the Galactic Center. All right, I'm going to take another drink of coffee. Okay. So I decided to do a journey to the Galactic Center, and I was informed by your higher self I should definitely go, and that I would find information there about my soul, about my consciousness, about all that I am. Super important, specific information. And that's like, okay, so I did. I got in the zone, and I got my intention connected to the infinite, and I said I'm ready to go to the Galactic Center, and I welcome that experience. It was not what I thought it was going to be at all. In fact, the Galactic Center that I went through was a challenge, was a total challenge. It was almost like my human consciousness was put through a program, a simulation of my own identity and what my challenges are when it comes to comprehending myself. And it's just one tiny little bit of information. This was so huge for me. When I went to the Galactic Center, it started on another lifetime, which was 5 soul cycles ago. 5 soul cycles ago. So what's a soul cycle? What does that mean exactly? I think the best way to define it is when your soul has gone through a revelation, which could be thousands and thousands of lifetimes of self-discovery. It comes to a place of so-called completion, okay? And so it graduates to yet a new soul cycle of self-discovery. And that could be another thousands and thousands of lifetimes. I don't know. Anyway, I went to this part of myself is where it started at the Galactic Center. This part of myself was basically in like a pod of some kind. And it was like an interdimensional gateway to a single planet. And this planet had 100 different versions of life experiences going on. This planet was interdimensional. This planet was. So there was a society in 100 different versions of this planet's self, all going on simultaneously. All the while, this hundreds of different, let's just say 100 versions of societies on the single planet, but you can't see all the versions because they're kind of hidden by the veil of each other. And I was somebody who was sort of monitoring or controlling that veil. I don't really fully understand the role, but there was also beings that were above me that were also controlling this. That were also sort of controlling the fabrication of reality for 100 different versions of society on this planet. And me, in this pod, as this gatekeeper, whatever that is, was the best way to define the role, was sort of trapped. I couldn't leave my position or my post. And it's not like I ever needed to eat. I never aged because I wasn't in a dimension where I was in a density or a timeline where that existed. But somehow I was part of a movement where I had to do this role. And it had to do with monitoring all the different societies. All the while, there's this even higher role that is kind of controlling all the thousands and thousands of versions of consciousness that are here. It very much so kind of reminded me of Earth. And it was challenging. Every one of these souls were what I would define as slaves. Even if they didn't realize that they were slaves, they were all slaves. This was so hard for me 5 soul cycles ago, which could have been a million lifetimes ago. I struggled. I suffered in this role because I wanted things to change. And time and time and time again, I thought of ways that I might be able to throw off the whole system, the whole concept. If that I could change things, but I never did, and I never was really called to. I never was able to. I never really tried, other than to try to think of a way to. Anyway, I don't know, a million years. I don't know how you want to define time when there's no time in this role. But eventually time happens and I leave this post. I just gravitate away from it and it's done. And there's something about this life experience, all that very long time ago, and this life today. And I got to experience that my consciousness from today has developed. I got to experience how developed that I have become over all this time when I went back in time to visit that part of myself. And I have developed so extraordinarily. How can I just be one soul? Like that is also me, as this is me. And these are very specific parts of myself, of my consciousness. But I'm also interdimensionally connected to all times and all places. Do you understand what I'm saying here? So the past, I can go to the past anytime I want. I can go to the future anytime I want. And it doesn't matter. I could change the future, change the past, and it doesn't matter because it's all experience. And it's all happening in a million different timelines. And that's just totally normal. So I talked to myself in this lifetime, and that's how I started to understand all this information. And she showed me what it was like to leave the body at that time, and she just left the body. And then slowly over the course of time has become me, I guess you could say. So after this, I was taken to yet another doorway. This doorway was a very disturbing aspect of myself, very, very disturbing aspect of myself. Anyway, there was doorway after doorway after doorway after doorway after doorway after doorway. It took me so long to get to the Galactic Center. It's like, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? That's what it was like, trying to get to the Galactic Center. And I had to go through all these doorways of my own reflection. And this was all the information that I was meant to read in that book, but it didn't come to me as a book or a library or university. It came to me as a simulation of reflection of myself. And then I had to constantly think outside the box in order to find the next doorway. It was hard. And once I found the next doorway, I would be in a new room, a new experience that I'd have to solve. And it would just be like, man, I'm starting to, this is getting old really fast. I had to take even time to just stop the journey and just come into myself and wait. And then really process what this meant to me, and then project myself back to see if I could change things. All right, so when I got to the Galactic Center, it was pretty extraordinary for me, because the Galactic Center is sort of like, I guess, was the healing of the whole experience, was the meaning of it all. And it was like shedding layers of my own consciousness to get to it. And once I had done that, I had leveled up my soul. I had healed myself. Just a part of my consciousness, not my whole thing. I mean, it's too big. So give me a minute here, because I did this last week. I've been wanting to tell you guys all of this stuff, and I haven't been able to. And now here I finally can. So like the biggest smorgasbord of this whole thing, I need to like remember exactly how it went. I just recall reaching a place that could only be described as heaven, okay? And when I got there, I saw all these millions of parts of me. I didn't know that it was me at first. I felt like there were a lot of different, like millions of beings that were just telling me how proud of me they were. I would never tell myself I'm proud of you. I have to work on that. A lot of us need to start telling ourselves, I'm proud of you. And so I felt how proud of me that all these beings were, until I realized that all the beings were me. And once I realized these millions and millions of beings were me, and that I was proud of myself, all the hate and the anger and the upset from that original lifetime, everything just dissolved. The scary door and all the parts of me that were just twisted up and weird, then all the layers of this that I had to get through, and it was hard learning and self-discovery, and it was weird. It was all melted away. And all these parts of me came in, and I just started to shine really bright, and I felt like I was graduating to yet a new soul cycle. That this lifetime was sort of like a pinnacle event in what is a soul cycle. And then I'm finally reaching a point where I can go to new learning, totally new learning. I feel a lot of people are reaching that in this life. A lot of us are reaching that in this life. But you can't just say I'm reaching it but not want to work on yourself, right? I work on myself constantly, and I'm constantly having new experiences, and it's almost hard to keep up sometimes between all these exciting things and then human world, because human world gets in the way of all these exciting things sometimes, and you just have to take breaks anyway. But I just wanted to tell you guys all of this. And one of the lessons that I learned was that part of myself from all those soul cycles ago that was so upset about the controlling ways that all these souls were being manipulated and controlled in all these different versions of this planet, which was not planet Earth, by the way. It reminds me of planet Earth. I was never able to let go of that reality. I was attached to it. You see what I mean by attachments? I was attached to the suffering of all the souls there. Millions and millions of bajillions of souls in 100 different societies in the same planet. I was attached to all of them. What do you think kind of learning that creates? You can't be attached to the suffering of others. You have to just accept the suffering of others is their choice, their soul's choice. If you become attached to their suffering, now you get to experience a lot of learning as to why you don't do that. You need to accept. And I got to see that the future of all of this was that they had to be sort of crushed, to transform into the diamond, and that they were all set free when the divine timing came for that to happen, and it was all a divine thing. And I needed to trust in the process, but I wasn't developed enough as a soul to understand that. And that's why they were able to show me how far I've come to see that I can be accepting of that. And that's where it all kind of came at the end, and all these parts of me returned to myself, because they were all the me's that I had attached to the millions and millions of people on all these hundreds of different layers of a planet. Do you see what I'm talking about? Are you keeping up with this? That's why acceptance is so important. That is why realizing that you're not just one is so important. You are one, in a way. We're a part of everything. But I'm telling you, you're everywhere. You're all over the place. And there's very specific parts of your consciousness that are helping you right now. Yourself is. You yourself are helping yourself. And these parts of you could be coming from the future. Just like me, going to that past version of myself. They could be parts of you coming from other dimensions in the same timeline. They could be coming from the past. We don't know. But it's like all you. I mean, how do I describe this? How do we know? It's like, how do we keep up with this reality? All right, I'm just going to pause for a moment and decide if I'm done talking right now. Decide if this video is even worth sharing, because I feel like I've just been a bag of air and words, and I don't know if any of it makes sense. But I've been wanting to tell you guys. I was so excited about that session. That session is private and confidential, just so you know. But I was okay. It was okay for me to talk about the details. And I was so excited to share it with you guys. And I was like so spot on with all the articulate details, but I wasn't able to talk about it yet. And then I went to the Galactic Center, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about that session and all the dimensions and the cool alien beings. And I'm going to talk about the Galactic Center. This is going to be so cool. Now, finally, days later, I'm able to talk about it. And now it's like, I hope it's as articulate as, as I wanted it to be. I don't know if it is. Okay. I just got one more thing I want to tell you. All right. So, one more detail about that session that I also found was interesting. I don't even know how this all ties together, but I just wanted to share it because it gives you a perspective on alien beings and how we're all just a part of an experience. It's even more interesting than that. So one of the reflections of this client was what would be described as a squid-like creature. And the heart was also in the mind. So the squid-like creature, it looked kind of like a jellyfish, but it also had more squid-like form, but it was kind of clear like a jellyfish. It was laying on a table. And the table was like a frying pan, and it was like stuck to the table, or maybe it just dried out and was stuck to the table. This thing was not able to feel pain. Anyway, there's these alien beings that look like flies. They were like full-fledged, upright flies. And the spirit realm showed me that these beings had like a mouth that kind of came down, just like a fly, like a black fly will bite you, and they're annoying. These alien beings stood upright like humans, but were like flies. And they had this very sharp beak, and it would like go straight down, and it could go into the head and suck brains out. It like could go in, and they would eat the insides of brains and things like that. And it's like, anyway, these flies were dissecting this jellyfish-like creature, and were specifically looking at the eyes, and the eyes were very much so like round. It looked very human-like. And they were looking at the eyes. They were looking at all the structure of this. This thing was still alive, and this thing was the client. It's like all the different ways that you can experience life. Being tortured without any sensation of feeling. So you're like numb the whole time, but you can see every twisted thing that's going on. The heart was in the brain, and they weren't sucking the brains out on this one. They were dissecting it. But the whole reality of this is crazy because it's like there's flies, littlest, tiniest little fly insects. But those little fly insects have full-fledged, like, being versions of themselves. And, you know, there's cats, and then there's cat aliens. There's praying mantis insects, and there's praying mantis beings. There's everything out there. So anything that is small has a bigger version of itself. And so we humans, what are we, like the fairies, you know? Like there's little tiny humans. Do they call those insects? Like, are there little human insects on some other planet? That people just step on them all the time, and we live in like underground anthills or something? Who knows? Who freaking knows? But that's the reality of the universe. It's like that. It's seriously like that. So are you a soul, or are you consciousness? And are you an individual consciousness, or are you everything? And how are you everything as you go down in dimension? You separate from the experience of the oneness so that you could explore more individualized interactions. But it feels like there's this thread that is you, this thread that is me, this thread that is each individual part of us. And each individual thread, so my thread has had very specific experiences. But this thread is already connected to everything, like one super brain. And I'm just like a synapse in a bigger brain. You know what I mean? It's crazy. Anyway, I just wanted to share all that, to give you something to think about. It's like the Twilight Zone conversation, but it's real. It's seriously real. All right. Thank you all for joining me on this little discussion journey. I hope you enjoyed it. If any of you would like to connect with me for a psychic session, you can visit me at my website at abbeynormalswisdomquest.com. All right. I want to thank you all for joining me, and I wish you all a wonderful day.